So hi everyone, hi again. I spoke already. I'm a PhD student from the CNRS lab LETG, and this is a work I did during my mobility in the University of Würzburg in Germany. So we already talked a little bit about it today, but I'm going to try explaining species distribution models, deep species distribution models, in particular with the concept-based XI methods. So first a little bit of context, but with a question, why do we use species distribution models in general? So here we're all convinced that we want to predict the species spatial distribution, but there is also a second aspect that we tend to forget, which is to understand the drivers of this distribution. And usually when you have like traditional random forest based SDM, we can quite easily have a feature attribution methods. Say, okay, variable A has this contribution, while variable B has a negative contribution to the prediction of the presence of that species. Maybe some of you know this graph. This comes from the 2022 GeoLife Clef Challenge, and the orange bars are the baselines. We see that the third one is a random forest trained on environmental variables. It has quite a much higher error rate than CNNs trained on satellite patches, and therefore this is an example showing that deep SDMs with more complex algorithms. So here CNN, but could be also transformers. More complex data, we have, instead of simple tabular data set, we have remote sensing imagery, we have better predictive performance. Well, actually this morning we showed, Emilia showed us that it's not always true, but in this case it is. And this is at the cost of interpretability. So the objective of this study is to reconcile the two original objectives, which are predicting and understanding. For that, we used concept-based XAI. The objective is to extract ecological knowledge from these deep SDMs by aligning the explanations with human reasoning by explaining AI predictions through high-level interpretable concepts. So, for instance, if we are an ecologist, the concept can be a crop type. If that's not the case here, but we are doing some medicine, it would be the color of the lung. Why is it an interesting approach? Because it facilitates interdisciplinary collaborations, and most of us, I think, collaborate with experts from other fields. The expert can define the concept. Also, it provides global explanations across a class. We compared to, for instance, GradCam heat maps that gives us one explanation for one prediction, and also it works on any trained computer vision model, or even generative text models would work. However, it requires a data set of concept patches that are adapted to the application domain. So first part, predicting. I'll go quick on this because this is not the main part of my presentation. But we studied two aquatic emerging insects, so Plecoptera and Trichoptera. They're interesting because they provide several ecosystem services to terrestrial ecosystems. And so by mapping their presence on terrestrial ecosystems, we also map the ecosystem services. For instance, they provide an intake of nitrogen to the surrounding fields. So that's why it is interesting to study them. To do that, we have we have very little number of data, but we have put 234 sticky traps, which got us an information of presence and absence. So that was for our field occurrence data. On the other side, we got some environmental data with some that we acquired with a drone with two sensors, one multispectral, one LiDAR. And we extracted dispatch at the trap locations on 5 different agricultural sites in France. Now that we have our data, we tried 3 different models. So one is, we called it in a pompeux way, Cerberus CNN, because it has 3 different branches, and we look at different patterns of different scales, so micro, meso, and macro scales. One is kind of a ResNet 50, but we adapted to our 7-band input. And the last one is a vision transformer that all output binary classification, presence or absence. I kind of skipped the results, but you just need to know that for the CNNs, we got very good results, like reliable results. For the vision transformer, it was a little bit more difficult because for the Plecoptera, we got reliable results, but for the Trichoptera, we got pretty bad results. So now that we have predicted the presence of our insects, we're happy, but we want to understand why they are where they are. And for that, I told you we would be doing some concept-based XAI, so we need concepts. We chose 15 different concepts that are oriented toward like land use, land cover classes. We have wooded elements, for instance, hedgerow, you can see an example. We have water elements, infrastructure elements such as these roads, crops elements, grasslands, and farming practices with organic and conventional crops. And we also have quite a lot of random patches that you'll see very soon why they are important. This patch, they look similar to the one we used to.
By random, you mean mixed? What's random patches? Sorry.
It's
patches mixing two labels.
I will explain it right now. No, I didn't plan to do it, but I will do it. Use this slide to do it. So to extract our patches, we have identified the localization of this concept either by field work, for instance, for water elements. This is very difficult to do it by photo interpretation. We also use photo interpretation, and we used open data, and we extracted patches that are centered on the concept location. For the random patches, we sampled an X, we sampled a Y, and we extracted the patches. So among the random patches, we could have, for instance, a road, but this will not be the majority of the random patches. And now the main slide. How does it work? We use a method. So concept-based XAI is a family of methods, and the method we use is robust TCAV for testing with concept activation vector, which allows to quantify the influence of a concept on the presence and the absence classes, well, on any classes we want to explain, but these are our classes. So first, we need one concept that we will evaluate independently from each other, and a random set to be a reference. Second thing, we need some patches for a class that we want to study, for instance, the presence of Plecoptera. We will send them in our trained model and extract at a layer L that we have identified. Usually it's the last one before the last one of the feature extractor. We will extract at this layer L 2 things. One is the gradient of the test examples with respect to the logit of the class. And the other thing is the activations of the concept and the random patches. Now that we have these things, we can compute the concept activation vector, which is the difference between the mean activations for the concept examples. So we have activations for this patch, activation for this patch, etc., etc. And we have the mean vector, and we do the same for the random patches. And by computing the difference between the two mean activations, we get a direction toward the concept. So here, this is a direction toward the concept of road. This direction will help us compute the sensitivity score. For each patch, we will compute the dot product between the gradient and this direction. This means how does the prediction evolve when we're going toward the direction of this concept. if the sensitivity score is positive, then we say that this concept had a positive impact for that particular patch. And overall, if we have more than 50% of our patch where we have a positive influence, then we'll say that the concept had a positive influence on the class overall, for instance, on the prediction of the class Plecoptera. Yes?
So it's like a hard threshold, right? Which is basically like if it influenced it in like more than half of the cases, you consider it influential.
Yes.
But I guess I'm curious, like if there might be some concepts that are like very informative, but actually just only show up some of the time, right? Like if it's there, it's certainly that thing, but it actually just isn't, it doesn't show up very much. And it's maybe not true for like on average more than half. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that
So
makes
like
sense.
highly informative, but rare concepts.
Actually, yes, this is a bias. The thing is, if it has no negative impact, then it will probably be around 0. The sensitivity score will be around 0, and in the end, will be around more or less 0.5, like 50% of our of positive sensitivity scores, and so we will not be able to have a conclusion about that. So this is not something we should discard, but this is something we cannot conclude from. So a few results, so quite terrifying table, but what you need to check is that I told you quite quickly, to be honest, but that the vision transformer had terrible results for the Trichoptera, and this is I chose to show this to you because I thought it was important. When you explain you explain a model, not the underlying ecological processes, and when the model is bad, you'll get bad explanations. So we just need to keep that in mind. That being said, it is interesting to see that when we have reliable models, we have most concepts with consistent scores across architectures. So this is quite reassuring about the quality of the method. For instance, in the case of the isolated trees, for the Plecoptera, all 3 architectures outputted a much higher, a score much higher than 0.5. Another thing is, well, it was to be expected, but the prediction of the presence for both taxa is driven by natural features, while crops have negative influence. Well, this was to be expected, but there are some things that are less expected. For instance, infrastructures, such as roads and building. We were surprised to see that Trichoptera, these concepts seem to have a positive influence on the prediction of Trichoptera. And afterward, after seeing these results, I went to check the literature, and I found this paper, this old paper from, not a century ago, but 50 years ago. Please, it's really nice. And it showed that, rural highways had not they could not find a significant impact on the distribution of aquatic insects. So it remains an open question, and maybe this shows us that further analysis could be interesting. And last thing, what I think is interesting for managers, for land managers, is that we can compare the concept to focus our attention on specific concepts. And for instance, in the case of Plecoptera, woodlands are the most important concept for the present, while for the Trichoptera, they are the wetlands. So I think for implementation of this method, this is very interesting. To conclude, I think robust TCIV successfully reunites the interpretation and prediction objectives of SDM. So we created a landscape data set, and if you want to use it, feel free. I mean, we did the job, can reuse it. The definition is very good, and so you can resample it to your needed resolution. Also, we've seen it with the infrastructure concept. It might be a new pathway to generate hypotheses in cases where results are counterintuitive. And finally, robust TCAV, we feel like it can empower the policymakers and the law managers because we have landscape scale decisions and not at this location there is an insect, cool, but we would like to know at a broader scale. And so you can find the paper code and Dataset here, paper which got accepted last week at ECML. So yes, thank you.
Yes. Really interesting paper. Did you consider including as a feature streams?
Yes, we did actually. Blah 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 blah. Okay, here in
Linear body of water. Okay.
Yeah, we include many. So I did not say streams because, for instance, we have maybe someone better in English than me. We have des fossés, ditches. We have ditches, for instance, which are not really a stream. We have permanent and non-permanent bodies. So we took this general terminology. While surface a body of water, they are like okay.
Yeah, this is fine.
Okay, great. Yes.
So TCAV, robust TCAV, is relies on having a predefined set of concepts, and it allows it to test the importance of the concepts that you predefine. And so, for example, and you may be missing quite a bit here. For example, in insects, quite often edges are more important than the actual habitat.
Like the frontiers?
The edges, yeah. And so there's a lot of work on edge versus interior and the importance of it and edges. And for many animals, actually, and plants, but edges have very different kind of importance than the habitat itself, and which habitats are meeting on the edge is also important. But but more globally, the robust TCAV relies on having that predefined set of concepts, and you can test for the importance of each one. Sparse autoencoders, on the other hand, actually allow you to discover potentially semantically meaningful concepts. Have you compared those? Or combined or considered expanding?
So two things. First thing about the edges, of course, like this is a set of concepts that we chose and it's not perfect, but you could always choose to center the patches on these edges. So the definition of the concept is whatever you want. And second thing, there are also, so this is supervised, but there are also unsupervised automatic extraction of concepts that could be used, but usually it's much more difficult to interpret. We are not so sure. Like for some concept, it's obvious, and for some concepts, it's not really obvious, and so that's why we chose to go for the supervised approach. But there are some approach like this, and so this kind of related, but there are also some kind of bottleneck concept-based models, which will try to predict first some variables, and so at the end you'll be at the end of the encoder, the embedding will be variables like numbers, which will be a reference to.
I'm not talking about GradCam and saliency.
Yeah, I'm not talking about GradCam.
Like sparse autoencoder and sort of embeddings.
Yeah. But anyway, yes. So there are some unsupervised things, and we chose to go for the supervised because we thought that it would be more interpretable.
So I'm wondering if pairing up, like closing the loop of using SAEs, sparse autoencoders to discover potentially, to suggest new semantically meaningful concepts that you can then test through TCAV.
Yeah, of course. Well, there is one study that did that, and I did a loop, but it was for plant disease. You can check concept. There is XAI. You
We've done it for traits,
Okay.
for taxonomic traits.
Okay. Cool.
Any other questions? We have a few minutes. Yes.
Great, very interesting. Thank you. So have you explored the embedding space more in the sense of, for example, for all the road images, have you seen if you actually see a cluster of these patches also in embedding space?
Well, yes, but only when, well, what we where I try to plot the, like, for instance, reference random patches and the concept, or when we compare to each other, actually, instead, I didn't talk about that because I went quick about that. You switch the random patches with another concept. Anyway, and you can see pretty well the two concepts in the embedding using the activations. But I did not try to display all the different concepts in one visualization. With PCA or TSNE.
I would just be curious if there are maybe some confounders like along roads. I mean, you don't have a segmentation used, right? So it might be very much the strip along the road that is important, which is done very closely to hedgerow, for example. So did you make maybe a kind of proximity analysis done in this embedding space?
No, but I guess this is a usual problem. We're only doing some correlative models, not causal. So this is a vast question, I guess.
For the much must be interesting, like yes, and on the embedding space, see if you can see the clusters.
Like the way we define our concept will really guide our explanations. So if we define our concept to be very precise on the side of the roads, for instance, we'll get explanations for the side of the roads. Mm-hmm. And yeah, this is it all comes from how we define our concept.
Actually, sorry, I don't understand that. How would you, because you're using like a visual, like the visual embedding, right? So how would you be very precise about the side of a road?
Okay, for the side of the road, this is right next to it. So this is very difficult, but well, just to say that, for instance, if you want to have a frontier between a crop and a forest, if you center your patch on a frontier, then you have an explanation about this frontier, but
no, but you have context window.
The context.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can actually say that. I think if you had the whole point of convolution is so that it's translation invariant. So just the fact that you centered it on that point, I think would not capture what's going on in the actual feature space.
Yes.
Like if the boundary was like 3 pixels over, it should still be highlighted in the process of convolution and pooling, right? So
like in the original TCAF paper, the concept of stripes, it doesn't change if you center it on the white on the black part, right?
But yeah, this concept much easier to understand, I guess. And we tried something with higher level concept. So yeah, this is more difficult than just stripes. So Davis is referring to the original TCAV paper, where they tried to understand why did we predict a zebra, and the main concept was there are stripes on the zebra. These concepts are much simpler than, for instance, wheat or maize crops, which can be quite, like the difference can be quite fuzzy. And so this is the first work about using this approach.
Cover mapping. This is complex. Yeah,
this is complex. But at the end, like the explanation seems really understandable. The literature is going in the way of our explanation, so this is quite reassuring about.
Yeah, no, I think it's really cool work. I just was pushing back on the idea that you could actually define a concept as being something that was like the boundary, and then using this exact method, be able to really guarantee that what you were picking up was the boundary and not something else, kind of gestalt in the image features. Like I feel like you'd have to add some additional constraints somehow, or like do some, I don't know, weird shit with data augmentation or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Dash-based, to Sarah's point, dash-based methods are really hard about edges. In fact, the shift is a bit much better to check the edges than dash-based methods. And then they also, for example, really, really bad about things like length.
Yeah, of course. Here, for instance, some other papers that studied the distribution of these insects, these same insects, they use random forest and their variables were distant to water, for instance. And in this case, it's true that we could not say, okay, this patch is at 100 meters from a water body. So this is a limitation of this approach.
I think, Antoine, did you have a question or?
Well, it's really minor question.
If it's a small question, you can.
It's really minor. It's more comment or a question. It's really a genuine question. In ecology, usually I've been used to use concepts for a theoretical concept like the niche or stuff. Is it very common in like land use or in your fields to use concept for land use classes or things like which are to me are object and not really like a theoretical concept. But is it I guess it's a very used term.
Recently,
okay. It's just so surprised to see.
So it's a concept because the name of the family of methods is concept-based XI, but we could call them variables. We could call them.
It was just a curiosity question. Things move quite fast.
Okay, I think with that,
is faster.
thank you, Augustin.